Welcome to True Crime Untangled, where we unravel the darkest secrets and shocking betrayals. Today, we dive into the chilling story of a woman who uncovered her husband's double life, a tale of love, lies, and ultimate resilience. Emily Carter's life was the kind of life many people dreamed of: stable, happy, and filled with love. She and her husband Daniel had been married for 7 years, and to the outside world, they were the perfect couple. They lived in a cozy suburban home with a neatly trimmed lawn and a porch adorned with potted plants. Emily worked as a graphic designer, while Daniel was a project manager at a thriving tech company. Their careers were flourishing, and they often spent weekends exploring new restaurants, hiking trails, or simply enjoying quiet evenings at home. Friends and family admired their relationship, often commenting on how well they complemented each other. Daniel was the outgoing, charismatic one, always ready with a joke or a thoughtful gesture, while Emily was more reserved, her calm demeanor balancing his energetic personality. The couple had big plans for the future. They often talked about starting a family, imagining what their children might look like and how they would raise them. Emily had even started browsing baby names and decorating ideas for a nursery. She felt secure in their marriage, believing that their love was unshakable. Daniel was attentive and affectionate, always making sure to text her during the day or bring home her favorite dessert after work. He remembered the little things, like how she took her coffee or the book she had mentioned wanting to read. Emily felt cherished, and she trusted Daniel completely. But as time went on, subtle changes began to creep into their routine. Daniel started working longer hours, often coming home late with excuses about urgent deadlines or last-minute meetings. At first, Emily didn't think much of it. She understood that his job was demanding and that sometimes sacrifices had to be made. She would wait up for him, reheating dinner and keeping the lights on, eager to hear about his day. But as the weeks turned into months, the late nights became more frequent and Daniel seemed increasingly distant. He would come home exhausted, barely engaging in conversation before retreating to the couch or heading straight to bed. Emily tried to brush it off, telling herself that he was just stressed or overworked. There were other small signs too, things that Emily noticed but didn't want to dwell on. Daniel's phone, which he used to leave casually on the kitchen counter, was now always in his pocket or face down on the table. He had started taking more business trips, often leaving on short notice and returning with vague stories about what he had been doing. Emily's friends occasionally made offhand comments about how Daniel seemed different lately, but she quickly dismissed their concerns. She didn't want to believe that anything could be wrong. After all, they had built a life together, and Daniel had always been so devoted to her. Still, a tiny seed of doubt had been planted in Emily's mind. She found herself replaying their conversations, searching for clues she might have missed. Was he less affectionate than he used to be? Had he stopped asking about her day? She tried to push these thoughts away, convincing herself that she was overthinking things. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The man she had married, the man she thought she knew so well, seemed to be slipping away, and she didn't know why. Emily's perfect life, once so full of promise and joy, was beginning to feel like a fragile facade, and she had no idea how much darker things were about to get. It was a quiet Tuesday evening when Emily's world began to unravel. She had been sitting at the kitchen table scrolling through her phone when Daniel's laptop caught her eye. He had left it open on the counter, something he rarely did. Emily hesitated for a moment before walking over to it. She wasn't the type to snoop, but curiosity got the better of her. She told herself she was just going to check the grocery list they had been updating together. As she clicked on the browser, a notification popped up in the corner of the screen. It was a message from someone named Jess. "Thanks for today." The message itself was innocent enough, but something about it made Emily's stomach twist. She clicked on the chat window, her fingers trembling slightly as she scrolled through the conversation. Most of the messages were about work meeting times, project updates, and the occasional joke, but there were little things that stood out to her. Jess often used playful emojis, and Daniel responded in kind. There were late-night messages, too, sent long after Daniel had claimed to be working. Emily's heart began to race as she noticed how frequently they were communicating. It wasn't just during office hours they were texting early in the morning, during lunch breaks, and even on weekends. Emily's mind raced as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. She told herself it was just a friendly work relationship, but the knot in her stomach tightened. She closed the laptop and stepped away, trying to shake off the unease. But the seed of suspicion had taken root, and she couldn't ignore it. Over the next few days, Emily found herself paying closer attention to Daniel's behavior. She noticed how he would quickly silence his phone when it buzzed, or how he would step out of the room to take calls. He seemed more distracted than usual, his mind always somewhere else. One night, while Daniel was in the shower, Emily made a decision she never thought she would make. She picked up his phone, her hands shaking as she entered his passcode, a code she had seen him use countless times. Her heart pounded as she opened his messages, scrolling through the conversations with Jess. The messages were still mostly professional, but there were moments that felt too personal. Jess had sent a selfie captioned, "Feeling tired but happy," and Daniel had replied with a heart emoji. Another message from Jess read, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She felt like she was intruding, but she couldn't stop herself. She opened Daniel's photo gallery next, her stomach sinking as she found a folder of deleted photos. Most of them were of Jess, selfies, candid shots, and even a few of them together at what looked like a company event. Emily's hands trembled as she swiped through the images. There was one photo in particular that made her heart ache. Jess and Daniel standing close together, smiling at the camera, their body language unmistakably intimate. Emily felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She quickly put the phone back where she had found it, her mind spinning. The next day, Emily checked their shared credit card statement, something she rarely did. Her heart sank as she saw a charge for an expensive restaurant she had never been to. The date matched one of Daniel's late work nights. She felt a mix of anger and betrayal, but also a strange sense of determination. She needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Emily decided to start keeping a closer eye on Daniel, documenting everything she found. She knew she was crossing a line, but she couldn't ignore the growing feeling that her husband was hiding something life-changing. The perfect life she had built with Daniel was beginning to crumble, and Emily was determined to uncover the truth no matter where it led. Emily's initial shock and heartbreak quickly turned into a quiet determination. She couldn't ignore the evidence piling up, and she knew she needed to see the full picture before confronting Daniel. What started as a casual glance at his messages had now become a full-blown investigation. She began by keeping a closer eye on his daily routine, noting the times he left for work, the excuses he gave for staying late, and the subtle changes in his behavior. Daniel seemed more preoccupied than ever, often lost in thought or distracted during their conversations. Emily's once unwavering trust was now replaced by a gnawing suspicion that refused to go away. One evening, after Daniel claimed he had to work late again, Emily decided to follow him. She waited in her car outside his office building, her heart pounding as she watched him exit with Jess. They walked to a nearby park, laughing and talking like old friends. Emily's stomach churned as she watched them sit on a bench, their body language unmistakably intimate. Jess leaned in close, her hand resting on Daniel's arm, and at one point they shared a kiss. Emily felt like the ground had been ripped out from under her. She sat frozen in her car, tears streaming down her face as the reality of Daniel's betrayal sank in. But instead of confronting him right then, she decided to gather more evidence. She needed to know how deep this went. Over the next few weeks, Emily's investigation became more methodical. She began tracking Daniel's movements, noting the times he left the house and the places he went. She checked his phone whenever she had the chance, uncovering more deleted messages and photos. She even created a separate email account to monitor his online activity, discovering that he had been booking weekend getaways under the guise of work trips. Each new piece of evidence felt like a punch to the gut, but Emily couldn't stop. She was driven by a mix of anger, hurt, and a desperate need for the truth. One of the most shocking discoveries came when Emily decided to look into Jess's background. She found Jess's social media profiles and began scrolling through her posts. There were photos of Jess and Daniel together, smiling at fancy restaurants, hiking in the mountains, and even lounging on a beach. Emily's heart ached as she realized these were the trips Daniel had claimed were for work. Jess's captions were even more painful to read. One post from a few months ago read, "Found my person," accompanied by a photo of her and Daniel holding hands. Another post mentioned starting over and finally being happy. Emily felt like she was living in a nightmare. The man she had loved and trusted had been living a double life, and Jess seemed completely unaware of Emily's existence. Emily's investigation took an even darker turn when she stumbled upon a hidden folder on Daniel's laptop. It was labeled personal, and inside were documents that made her blood run cold. There were drafts of divorce papers, dated months earlier, with Jess listed as Daniel's future spouse. Emily's hands shook as she read through the documents. Daniel had been planning to leave her for Jess all along. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just an affair, it was a calculated betrayal. Daniel had been lying to her for months, maybe even years, and Emily had been completely in the dark. As the pieces of the puzzle came together, Emily felt a mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, and a fierce determination to take control of her life. She knew she couldn't let Daniel continue to deceive her. She began documenting everything, taking screenshots of messages, saving photos, and making copies of the documents she had found. She knew she would need proof when the time came to confront him. Emily's once peaceful life had been turned upside down, but she was no longer the trusting, naive woman she had been. She was ready to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Emily's discovery of the hidden folder on Daniel's laptop marked a turning point in her investigation. The divorce papers, dated months earlier, were a devastating blow. They weren't just a sign of infidelity. They were proof that Daniel had been planning to leave her for Jess all along. Emily felt a mix of emotions, anger, betrayal, and a deep sense of loss. But amidst the pain, there was also a growing resolve. She needed to know everything, no matter how painful it might be. She couldn't let Daniel continue to deceive her. Emily's next step was to dig deeper into Jess's life. She spent hours scrolling through Jess's social media profiles, piecing together the timeline of her relationship with Daniel. The photos and captions painted a clear picture. Jess and Daniel had been together for over a year, traveling, celebrating milestones, and building a life that Emily had thought was hers. Jess's posts were filled with declarations of love and happiness, completely oblivious to the fact that Daniel was married. Emily's heart ached as she realized that Jess might not even know about her existence. The thought of Daniel lying to both of them made her feel sick. One post in particular stood out to Emily. It was a photo of Jess and Daniel at a beach resort, captioned, "Here's to new beginnings." The date of the post matched one of Daniel's supposed work trips. Emily remembered that week vividly. She had been feeling lonely and had asked Daniel if they could plan a vacation together. He had brushed her off, saying he was too busy with work. Seeing the photo now, Emily felt a surge of anger. Daniel had not only betrayed her, but had also made her feel like she was asking for too much. She had trusted him completely, and he had taken advantage of that trust. Emily's investigation didn't stop at social media. She began to piece together the financial aspects of Daniel's double life. She went through their bank statements and credit card records, uncovering charges for hotels, restaurants, and gifts that she had never seen or received. There were payments for jewelry and expensive dinners, all made during times when Daniel had claimed to be working late or traveling for business. Emily felt a pang of jealousy as she imagined Daniel showering Jess with the same affection and attention he had once given her. But more than that, she felt a sense of injustice. Daniel had been using their shared resources to fund his affair, all while keeping her in the dark. The most shocking revelation came when Emily found a series of emails between Daniel and Jess. They were planning a future together, discussing moving in, buying a house, and even starting a family. Emily's hands trembled as she read through the messages. Daniel had been making promises to Jess that he had once made to her. He had talked about their future with the same enthusiasm and certainty that he had used when discussing their plans with Emily. It was as if their marriage had meant nothing to him. Emily felt a deep sense of betrayal, but also a strange sense of clarity. She finally understood the full extent of Daniel's deception. As Emily continued to gather evidence, she began to prepare herself for the inevitable confrontation. She knew she couldn't keep this to herself any longer. The weight of Daniel's betrayal was too much to bear, and she needed to hold him accountable. She printed out the emails, saved the photos, and organized everything into a folder. She wanted to be ready when the time came to face him. Emily's once perfect life had been shattered, but she was no longer willing to live in the shadows of Daniel's lies. She was ready to take control of her own story, no matter how painful the truth might be. Emily's heart pounded as she sat at the kitchen table, the folder of evidence spread out in front of her. She had spent weeks gathering every piece of proof she could find: photos, messages, emails, and financial records. The weight of what she was about to do felt overwhelming, but she knew she couldn't keep it bottled up any longer. Daniel had been living a double life, and it was time for the truth to come out. She waited for him to come home, her mind racing with what she would say and how he might react. When the front door finally opened, Emily took a deep breath, steeling herself for the confrontation. Daniel walked in, looking tired but cheerful, as if nothing was wrong. He greeted her with a casual smile, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. Emily didn't return the smile. Instead, she gestured for him to sit down, her expression serious. Daniel's smile faded as he noticed the folder on the table. He hesitated for a moment before sitting across from her, his eyes flicking nervously between her face and the folder. Emily didn't give him a chance to speak. She opened the folder and began laying out the evidence: photos of him and Jess, screenshots of their messages, copies of the divorce papers, and the emails planning their future together. Daniel's face went pale as he realized what was happening. He tried to interrupt, to explain, but Emily held up a hand, silencing him. Her voice was steady, but filled with pain as she recounted everything she had discovered. She told him about the nights she had waited up for him, only to find out he was with Jess. She described the heartbreak of seeing the photos and reading the messages, of realizing that the man she had loved had been lying to her for over a year. Daniel's attempts to defend himself fell flat. He stammered out excuses, claiming that he had been confused, that he never meant to hurt her, but Emily wasn't buying it. The evidence was too damning, and his words rang hollow. When Emily finally finished speaking, the room fell silent. Daniel looked down at the table, unable to meet her eyes. The confident, charismatic man she had married was gone, replaced by someone who seemed small and ashamed. Emily felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and a strange sense of relief. She had carried the weight of his betrayal for weeks, and now it was out in the open. She told Daniel that their marriage was over, that she couldn't trust him anymore. He didn't argue. Instead, he quietly agreed, his voice barely above a whisper. It was as if he had known this moment was coming but had been too cowardly to face it. In the days that followed, Emily took control of her life. She filed for divorce using the evidence she had gathered to ensure a fair settlement. She also reached out to Jess, not out of malice, but to make sure Jess knew the full truth. To her surprise, Jess was just as shocked as Emily had been. She had no idea Daniel was married, and was devastated to learn that she had been part of such a deep betrayal. The two women didn't become friends, but they shared a mutual understanding of the pain Daniel had caused. Emily's journey wasn't easy. There were days when the hurt felt unbearable, when she questioned her worth and wondered if she would ever trust again. But over time, she began to heal. She leaned on her friends and family, rediscovered her passions, and slowly rebuilt her life. The documentary ends with Emily standing tall, a symbol of resilience and strength. She had faced one of the most painful experiences of her life and emerged stronger on the other side. Her story serves as a powerful reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is always a path forward.